What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video here on the fellow KGB channel. Today is Sunday. It's almost 1:30 p.m. Central Time, and we're going to be going over our player watch list for the Week 11 Waiver Wire NBA Fantasy Basketball. And I just want to say we're almost to our goal of 200 subscribers. So if you guys want to help us reach that, I don't mind being off by a day or two for our February goal. But anyways, we got the weird week because it's All-Star Week. Towards the end of the weekend here. So I'm going to hop into a screen share and we're going to just look at a few things. I think the most important thing is to kind of just start with looking at this advanced schedule grid and just seeing how many games each team's play, because we know we're off from Friday to about Tuesday. So no games Friday to Tuesday of the week here. We're going to pick back up on Wednesday. It looks like March 10th, I believe here. So we only have a handful of games the first Monday through Thursday. So ideally, if you're looking to make a pickup, you want to pick up a guy that gets 3 games. So there's a handful of teams that do play 3 games. You got the Denver Nuggets who have 3 games in the first half of the weekly schedule. You got the Pacers with 3 games. Let me keep going down here. The Pelicans play 3 games, and I thought there was one more. Looks like the Trailblazers also play 3 games, and then the Spurs too. So there's a handful of teams that do play 3 games. So really look at your schedule to make sure that you're picking up the best players that get the most games in the first half of the week. And then otherwise, I think there's teams that there's a handful of teams here. You got the Spurs, the Blazers, and the Pelicans. They all play 6 games. So that's 3 games for the first half, and then 3 games when the NBA All-Star break is ended and the games return. So I typically, if you can get a Pelican, a Trailblazer, or a San Antonio Spur, I think those are going to be my favorite ads. But I kind of like viewing it into 2 groups. You have your first pre-All-Star, and then you have the after the All-Star. So it's a long week. Try to make the best of it with the schedule grid. This is #basketball, so if you want to check out those. Otherwise, you can kind of easily check it out just hitting the schedule tab here. So before we get to the 30-player watch list, I did want to just show, because I do play I have a really competitive 12-man league, so I just kind of want to show you guys the stats and the numbers that I look into, and then I just want to throw you guys some names of players that I, like myself, would pick up this week. So the way I do it is I just filter by my last 7 days to see who's playing the hottest. You can also filter by minutes and things like that to see who's playing the most. But some guys off the top of the charts here are going to be Derrick Jones Jr., who's a Trailblazer, so he's got the 3 games before All-Star and the 3 games after All-Star. So he's probably my top player to pick up, I think, for this weird, kind of bizarre All-Star week. He's been playing really, really good. So you see about 6 straight games, over 20-some points here, and just really solid minutes too. So I love that. So he's probably my #1 pickup of the week, Derrick Jones Jr. And then you got Saben Lee, who's been getting a lot of minutes for Detroit. He kind of dipped a little bit here on the 26th, but he's I don't know, he's pretty solid. If you need a guy for maybe 2 or 3 games this week, I think he could be the option there. And then if I had to pick up maybe one more guy off this list, we did mention the Pacers do have a handful of games here, so I'm into the Pacers. And then I don't see any Spurs on the list here, but I do like what Isaac Okoro's been doing as well. So just off the top of the head, Derrick Jones is probably my favorite guy to add. And then we're just looking here at the 30-player watch list that I have, and it ranges, from a handful of different percent rosters, because I know everyone plays in different, 10-man league, 12-man league, and up here. So some of the guys at the top of the list that are, higher owned but might be available: Derrick Rose, Dante DiVincenzo, Tim Hardaway, Terrence Ross, Kendrick Nunn, Wendell Carter, and Duncan Robinson. Now, all these guys, the top 7 guys on this list, are all above 50% owned, so there's a small chance that these guys are available. But Derrick Rose has been playing really, really well in New York, playing again for Tom Thibodeau. I mean, he just put up 40.75 points yesterday, 38 minutes, 17 points, 11 assists. So he's going to continue getting the bulk of the workload, I think, in New York going forward. And I don't know, just a really strong veteran play there. But again, he's about 67% owned, so I won't spend too much time there. Now, Dante DiVincenzo just had, I think this was a career high, 24 points the other night against the Pelicans here, 7 rebounds, 9 assists. Probably the best game of DiVincenzo's pro career here. You see 53.75 fantasy points, and I think at this point he's a must-own player. Like, I wouldn't consider dropping him. Of course, he'll have one of these, 11 or a 9, but you look at the rest of this points, and he's doing really well. So DiVincenzo needs to be owned if you're in a 10-man, specifically if you're in a 12-man. I think this is a great buy. So go ahead and snag DiVincenzo. Tim Hardaway Jr. just playing good starter minutes over here for Dallas, and just been steady the last 4 games, over 20 points. This is kind of the guy that add to the end of the bench, but he's under 60% owned, averaging 24 points on the season. And then the last 7 days, basically what he's been doing, 24.9. So you like to see that. Terrence Ross, I've covered Ross a lot on this show. He's averaging about 25.8 the last 7 days. He's under 60% owned. So I just think, man, this guy, he's been scoring the ball. Really, he had a really nice stretch here in mid-February, but kind of dipped back a little bit. But he's got a really nice floor here. His worst game has been about 14 points over the last couple weeks. So Terrence Ross needs to be owned, one of the best shooters for Orlando there. Kendrick Nunn, he's been seeing a good spike here as well. His scoring kind of peaked a little bit. His minutes are peaking back up again. And he's got a high floor, but I mean, if you can get some of these 45s, these 54s, some of these high 30s per week, this is the guy that I think needs to be owned in a 12-man and possibly a 10-man league. And then Wendell Carter Jr., I think I've been talking about him for maybe two of the last waiver wire shows. I didn't have the greatest game against Phoenix the other night here, but other than that, that's the outlier. Every other game here has been solid. If you can get about 20 points per game out of him on a floor, I think that's a great number. So Chicago Bulls about 55% owned here. Go ahead and get Wendell Carter. And then the last one above 50% owned is Duncan Robinson, who's starting to kind of turn it back around. He had a rough early start to the February where he was dipping into the teens again for fantasy points. But you see the last maybe 2 weeks, he's been on a tear, over 20 points in 6 straight games. So Duncan Robinson, one of those fringe guys that you could probably have at the end of your bench there. I like him quite a bit. And then we're going to get into some names here that are under 50% owned. Really good chance that you guys can get them in a 12-man league. That's Bobby Portis, Kevin Huerter, Goran Dragic, DeAndre Jordan, TJ McConnell, and Dylan Brooks. Now, I stopped the tier there because we have 6 guys who are above 40% owned and less than 50. So that's a good marker for just maybe being available in a 12-man league. I think Bobby Portis, I've been talking about him for a while now, and he's super steady. You can see he's the 12th best player at this position, almost 25 points per game and under 49% owned. I just think this is the guy that you just hold on to because he's going to have some of these 16s, these 18s, the 10. I'm not sure what happened in that one, but you just see some of these big, massive games. And if you just hold him for a week, he's going to collect in 3 or 4 games, he's going to collect 60, 70 points. So as one of the worst players on your team, I think you could, Bobby Portis, he's solid. Again, he's 12th best in the power forward department. And he needs to be owned, I think, in 10 and 12-man leagues. Kevin Huerter. Now, Kevin Huerter, he's very streaky. He's very streaky. But again, if you look at his numbers as like a whole week, that's when you start to see the benefit. So 28.5, a 10.5, a 39, a 17. Now, if you get all those in a 7-day span, you're feeling pretty good. You just can't get discouraged when you see a 17, a 13, and a 17, and a 19. That's probably a rough week. But he does have that potential to put up a good amount of points on a given night here. You're just looking for more consistency. So he had a nice little stretch here early February where he was scoring the ball pretty well. So we'll see if he can get things going back into the All-Star break here. Dragic has been getting his minutes back up here. He just came back from injury, 21 minutes, 33 minutes. This is a guy that I think is going to be a hot ad here. He might even make Kendrick Nunn's numbers go down a little bit. So I think if you're into Kendrick Nunn, I might look towards Dragic because when he's healthy, he's actually been kind of the better fantasy player. So keep an eye on him. And then we got here DeAndre Jordan, Brooklyn Nets. If you need a center, this is probably the guy about 22 points per game. He's not going to wow you every single night, but again, he has some of these big random nights, 32, 47. That kind of just is how he goes. So he's got a decent floor. Sometimes these 11s, that's really the only bad game that he's had, but otherwise it's around 18 points for a floor. So Jordan, about 47% owned. He needs to be looked at for sure. TJ McConnell, he's one of those Pacers that have 3 games in the first half of the schedule here. The man just continues to put up assists. Like, these numbers are really sweet. So if you're in a category league, I'm sure he's been already picked up. But for just standard points leagues, I think we're to a point here McConnell needs to play. They just had that big overtime game, 46 minutes here. But he's been playing really, really solid throughout the whole month of February. And he's just got this, I don't know, when he scores points and then he gets the assist, that's when you're going to see some of these big games. So I like TJ quite a bit. Dylan Brooks, really good shooting guard for the Memphis Grizzlies. Missed a few games here, but he's been kind of back onto his typical averages. He's averaging 25.5 on the season, and he's averaging that roughly the last 7 days. So this is a really solid player. A 12-man league, if this is your worst player, you're feeling really, really good. So only 40% owned. I like him quite a bit. And then now that we have kind of covered the top end of the spectrum of the watch list, we're looking at guys who are less than 40% owned. And from here, I only have Josh Jackson here at the top of the list, who's about 37% owned. And then it dips to even 30% owned. So Josh Jackson, he's kind of like the last of the 30% guys. But Detroit, they have a lot of opportunity for young players to get minutes and continue to score. And Josh Jackson has been impressive. He's just been having a great month of February. He had some injuries in January that he had to overcome and kind of get his way worked back into the starting lineup. And then basically since February, turned on, he has turned it on. So a lot of points, rebounds, assists. He's going to fill up kind of everything, chips and steals and blocks. So Josh Jackson, probably my favorite player. He just needs to stay on your roster. I think under 37% owned, it doesn't make any sense to me. He's getting starter minutes. He's probably one of Detroit's best scoring options, maybe outside of Jeremy Grant. So Josh Jackson, a lot of fun. You should probably go snag him and make sure he's not lingering out there. I almost skipped another Detroit Piston. Saddiq Bey, the rookie here, he's been playing a lot better. His minutes have gone up, and they're getting really consistent. You see 30 to 33 minutes the last 6 games, even going back to here with 38 against New Orleans, 27 against Boston. He's just, the last 2 weeks, he's been, more of a focal point for the Pistons to get on the floor. Looks like he's got a floor of about 18, 17 points on the low end. And then what I like here is the scoring. You look at the points column, everything has been just really consistent. You're not going to see these 30s every now and then, but as long as he's hitting double-digit points, I like his ability to stack up some rebounds, assists, and then get the steals as well. So Saddiq Bey, probably one of those guys that needs to be owned for the second half of the season. The last couple of weeks I've been talking about on my live shows is how a lot of these rookies and second-year players who are on teams that aren't very good, teams like Detroit, maybe even Minnesota, they're going to start to get more and more run down the season stretch here as they have nothing to play for. They want to get these guys ramped up for the next season. So Saddiq Bey is probably one of those guys that needs to be owned, one of the younger, more exciting players here, for the not-so-good Pistons team. And just in the last 7 days, he's averaging 26.6 points. So he needs to be owned, I think, in 12-man leagues. Nerlens Noel. Now, we've seen some positive reports about Mitchell Robinson coming back, maybe after the All-Star break. So this might be the last week or so to own Nerlens Noel. I don't have too much to say about him. He's not a fantastic player, but because he's getting some good minutes, he's getting good numbers. So you see, ever since Mitchell Robinson left with his hand injury, he's been averaging about 24, 25 points per game. So super steady, super safe. Only 23% owned, so he's a really good ad right now. Tristan Thompson here, center power forward for the Celtics. Now, his numbers are kind of streaky as well, but if you look at him and just see his numbers as a whole week, whether you get 3 or 4 games, you're going to like what you see. The minutes are, kind of inconsistent. He's averaging about 24 the last 7 days, 10 points, 9 rebounds. Averaging almost a double-double, so that should sell you enough to have him be maybe the worst player, the end of your bench player there for you. We got Derek Jones Jr., who, again, I started at the top of the show. Probably my favorite ad for at least the All-Star week. We'll see what happens there. We're hearing CJ McCollum might come back quicker than we thought, so he might be back and ready to go after the All-Star break. But at least for this week, Monday through Thursday, I think Derek Jones Jr. is probably the best player you could add to your lineups. Just starter minutes. He's a good scorer. He's really scrappy on defense. I love the blocks, especially if you're in a categories league. I think Derek Jones Jr. is going to be a great ad for this week, and then hopefully after the All-Star break as well. Now you have Jacob Poeltl here, he's on the Spurs, which is one of those teams we identified at the beginning of the show who have 6 games over this course of this, the All-Star break fantasy week. And Aldridge, I don't think Aldridge is still playing here. I'll have to double check that. Maybe Aldridge came back, but Jacob Poeltl has been getting starter minutes, 25 and 35. That's average of 30, whatever. But super good rebounder, really good on the defense here with the blocks. 28 points, 31 points. You like to see that. So he's a guy that not a super sexy pickup, but he does the dirty work. He's not a big scorer, but he's scrappy rebounder, good defender with the blocks too. So Poeltl needs to be owned. I think about 21% owned. And then I'm just going to kind of rapid fire some guys here. Robert Williams, he's one of those rookies that we talked about that should get a lot more run as the season progresses. Still pretty inconsistent, but you're starting to see his fantasy numbers, dip up here. A 38, a 39, and a 44. 34 down here. I really like seeing some of these numbers. So we've heard Brad Stevens say he wants to get him more involved down the stretch. So this is definitely a guy that I think is worth holding on to. If he's the worst player on your team, I think you could do worse. So especially as the season gets on, injuries happen. The Celtics are going to try to make sure he gets ramped up towards the end of the year. Patrick Williams, kind of the same thing. Chicago Bulls, we're going to see his numbers and his minutes stay steady and be a big part of their offense down the second half of the stretch. just 28, 28, 27, 17, 11. If you can just kind of stomach some of these not so great games, he's putting up some good numbers here that probably you're going to average, somewhere around 23, 24 points per game. So I like Williams quite a bit. Malik Monk has been playing good for Charlotte. Since they got their games going back again. 26, 39, 27, 16, 28 over the last 5 games. Steady minutes, and basically his numbers over the last few games, like he's just been dumping in points because Devontae Graham is still out. I'm not sure when Graham comes back. It might be after the All-Star break, but you look at these last 7 days compared to his season stats, 26 minutes, almost 25 points per game. He's doubling his rebounds, a little bit down on assists, same steals, down on blocks, but averaging almost 12 more points per game over his last 7 days. So Malik Monk, one of the hottest players you could add, averaging about 31.1 fantasy points over the last 7 days. And then you got Jalen Brunson, Danny Green, Monte Morris, Bruce Brown, who's been getting some good run for Brooklyn. Really steady numbers here, 26, 29, 40, 30. Really good run here while Kyrie and Durant have been kind of dinked up and held out. Danny Green, we kind of called all those guys. Saben Lee, now this is an interesting one because I kind of, talked about him at the beginning of the show. But this is the guy that kind of came out of nowhere here. And just over the last 7 days, you see 32, 32, 30, and 13. So he's getting some opportunity here with the injuries that Detroit's been having. But Dennis Smith kind of, hurt him the other night here. But definitely keep an eye on because Delon Wright and I guess Killian Hayes is still out. Maybe we see Killian return after the All-Star break. But this is the guy that's been getting minutes while Detroit's been going through some injuries. And then you got Daniel House here, who the last 3 games, 18, 33, 28. I kind of like it's inconsistent, but 33, 34, and 26 minutes, double-digit points, good rebounder, some interesting defense numbers here with the steals and blocks. So he's kind of a fun guy to keep an eye on. And the last guy to round out the list is rookie Isaac Okoro, who's been slowly turning it on. You see 4 of his last 5 games, all double digits. You love the minutes. They're going to continue to play him quite a bit. The rebounding numbers are coming up now. And then just looking at his last 7 days, this is what I like to see is a rookie player improving, then that's probably a guy that you want to add to your team. So he's up about a minute a game, up about 3 points per game, and he's almost doubled his rebounds over the last 7 days compared to his season stats. So almost everything is up. Assists are about the same, but everything's up and the turnovers are down. So Okoro, under 7% owned, I think this is the guy that I'm probably going to add to some of my 12-man leagues. So big fan of Isaac Okoro. And that's the watch list. That's pretty much everybody that I wanted to cover. I'm sure there's a bunch of names and other players that I missed as well, but those are just some of the names that caught my eye when doing this that are playing well right now, and they need to be owned. So I hope this helped. If it helped you guys and you're unsubscribed, definitely consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for your time. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday evening or Monday night whenever you're watching this, and have a good one. Thanks. Peace.